Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to get into something I think a lot of people can relate to. Sensitivity, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And we've got Teru Nakashima, this psychologist who's got a bunch of writing on this. And he really focuses on this idea of helping people who are highly sensitive really thrive, not just, get by,
Right.
but really like make the most of it.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
we're going to kind of go through some of the key things that come up in his writings,
Okay.
recognizing it as a strength, some of the common challenges that people who are highly sensitive face, and then some practical techniques for self-care.
That's great.
One of the things that I thought was so interesting is this idea of reframing.
Oh, yeah?
Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, reframing is huge, and Nakashima really dives into it. And kind of the first thing he does is define what are called empaths.
Okay.
And that's more than just being a good listener.
Yeah.
People who are empaths are so attuned to the emotions of other people that they absorb those emotions like a sponge. They're
intense.
Yeah, they prioritize others' needs above their own, sometimes to a fault, where their own well-being suffers.
Yeah.
And they might even feel physical sensations based on what's going on around them.
That's fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
that's taking it to a whole other level, not just feeling it, but like physically experiencing it.
Right.
Wow. So, I mean, if you are listening to this and you find yourself, often feeling drained after social interactions, or like you take on other people's burdens,
Yes.
does that sound like something?
Absolutely. And that deep empathy can lead to some really common challenges that Nakashima talks about.
Okay.
Like the fact that it can be so hard for these highly sensitive people to ask for help.
Okay.
They worry about being a burden or appearing weak, so they end up struggling alone.
Makes sense. So,
Yeah.
but like, how do you overcome that? Like, what does Nakashima say?
He has this great analogy
All right.
about appliances.
Appliances.
I would
Okay.
use a washing machine to save time and effort.
Right.
We don't even think twice about it. So why should we hesitate to ask for help when we need it?
Yeah.
It's just like using a tool to make life a bit easier.
Yeah. I love that it totally takes away that whole
Right.
stigma of, oh, I'm asking for help, I must be weak or something.
Exactly. And he suggests starting small,
Okay.
ask for like a simple favor, like borrowing a book or directions.
Yeah.
Each time you do it, just builds your confidence
Yeah.
and breaks down that resistance a little bit.
So it's not like you have to jump in the deep end. It's just baby steps.
Exactly.
Okay. That's good. What other kind of challenges does he talk about?
Well, he also mentions this tendency for highly sensitive people to get stuck in these like negative assumptions.
Oh, yeah.
Like they overthink things and jump to the worst possible conclusion.
Oh, yeah.
So like say your boss frowns at you.
Oh, yeah.
You immediately think they're angry
Yeah.
and you start dreading some kind of confrontation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then how do you break out of that?
That's where reframing comes in.
Oh,
So instead of assuming your boss is furious, you challenge that thought.
okay.
Could there be another explanation? Maybe they're just tired or focused on something else or have a headache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not saying that it's not a real thing, but you're saying, oh, okay,
Right.
maybe there are other possibilities.
Yeah. Shift your perspective to like a more neutral or even positive viewpoint.
Right. Okay.
And he doesn't just apply this to like external situations, but to self-care too,
Okay.
and managing our inner critic that we all have.
Oh, interesting. So how does that work for self-care?
So he has this exercise called dislike ranking,
Dislike ranking.
where you write down everything you dislike, rank them,
Okay.
and then analyze why you dislike them.
Okay.
It brings awareness to your negativity
Yeah.
and helps you see the thoughts and beliefs behind them.
Oh, that's good. So it's not just complaining. It's like,
Right.
oh, okay, why am I complaining?
Yeah. And then you apply reframing.
Okay. How does that work?
So let's say you dislike your boss because you see them as always angry. Okay. So you could reframe it to passionate about their work.
Oh, okay.
So it acknowledges their intensity, but shifts the focus from negative to maybe positive.
So you're not pretending they're not intense, but you're saying, okay,
Right.
maybe that intensity is not always a bad thing.
Exactly. It's about choosing a more helpful interpretation.
Right.
And the really cool thing is this can boost your self-confidence.
Really? How so?
Because you realize you can change your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
You're
No.
not at the mercy of your emotions. You have some control over them.
That's really empowering.
It is.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like you're not just stuck with whatever's going on in your head.
Right.
You can actually kind of take charge.
Yeah.
But he also talks about this in terms of like our own internal dialogue too, right?
Absolutely. He encourages using this reframing to transform our inner dialogue. that constant stream of thoughts we have about ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Those little voices that can be so critical.
Oh my gosh, they never stop. But how do you reframe that, like when it's so deep-seated, those beliefs?
Well, first, you want to become aware of those patterns. Like, what are you
Right.
telling yourself?
Okay.
Especially when you're feeling down or stressed.
Yeah.
And then challenge those messages.
Okay.
So instead of thinking I'm not good enough, try shifting it to I'm learning and growing every day.
So you're basically replacing those negative thoughts with
Yeah.
more positive ones.
More encouraging ones.
Okay, so it's like you're being your own cheerleader instead of
Yeah.
your own worst enemy.
Exactly. And, he even has a technique for reframing negative thoughts using music.
With music?
Yeah. He calls it diffusion.
Diffusion.
You actually sing those thoughts out loud to a familiar tune.
Wait, you sing the negative thought?
Yeah.
That sounds a little crazy. Like, how is that going to help?
It may seem strange,
Yeah.
but there's actually a psychological mechanism at work.
Okay.
By putting those thoughts to music,
Uh-huh.
especially a lighthearted or silly melody,
Right.
you create a sense of detachment from them. It's like taking away their power.
So if I'm singing like I'm a failure, but to like happy birthday, it kind of
Takes
takes the sting out of it.
It does, and it injects a bit of humor, which can be so disarming when you're dealing with that inner critic.
Yeah, yeah.
And he thinks this is especially good for breaking those rigid must and should thought patterns
Oh, okay.
that fuel so much negativity.
I like that he's giving us things to do,
Yeah,
like actually tangible things like, okay, sing it.
it makes it more practical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But he also, recognizes that highly sensitive people can really get overwhelmed and burnt out.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where his work on self-care and emotional regulation comes in.
Okay.
He provides all these techniques for managing those intense emotions like mindfulness, meditation, setting boundaries,
Yeah.
prioritizing self-compassion.
Right. So it's okay to feel deeply,
Yes.
but you also need to know how to protect yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And he even has an exercise for cultivating that self-compassion.
Oh, really? What is
It's
it?
called the self-compassion break.
Self-compassion break?
So, like when you're feeling overwhelmed or critical of yourself, you pause,
Okay.
acknowledge what you're feeling,
Yeah.
and say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life.
Wow.
May I be kind to myself in this moment.
Yeah.
May I give myself the compassion I need.
It's like giving that same kindness to yourself that you would
Exactly.
to someone else who's struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. As we're talking about all this, I'm realizing that his work isn't just about like coping with sensitivity.
Right.
It's like making it a source of strength.
Absolutely.
And
He sees sensitive individuals as having these unique gifts to offer the world,
that's interesting. I mean, how so?
especially when it comes to creating a more compassionate and understanding society.
Wow. So that's a pretty big leap, like from,
It is, but
changing the world.
he argues that as sensitive individuals learn to manage their own emotions and cultivate self-compassion, they naturally become more empathetic
Oh.
and understanding towards others.
So like we work on ourselves and it ripples outwards.
It does.
I like that. So it's like by healing ourselves, we're kind of helping to heal the world.
And he believes this collective sensitivity can be a real force for good,
Yeah.
especially in a world that often feels so divided.
Yeah. What really stood out to you from all of his work?
Well, one thing that really resonated with me was how much he emphasizes that not all sensitive people are the same.
Okay.
We have our own triggers and preferences and ways of experiencing the world.
Yeah.
It's not one size fits all.
So how do you figure out what your own sensitivities are?
Well, he encourages us to explore them,
Okay.
understand what drains our energy and what replenishes it.
Yeah.
And he even provides a framework for identifying our specific sensitivity archetype.
Archetype. Now, that sounds fancy. What is that?
So he describes various types, from emotional sensitivity, where you're deeply affected by the emotions of others,
Yeah.
to sensory sensitivity, where you're easily overwhelmed by loud noises or bright lights, to social sensitivity, where you might feel drained by large gatherings.
Oh, yeah. So understanding your own archetype can help you figure out how to take care of yourself better.
It can, and it can be really empowering
Okay.
because it allows you to advocate for yourself and create a life that aligns with your sensitive nature.
And I imagine it also helps you communicate your needs to others better,
Absolutely.
which is so important in relationships. That's so important, though, like knowing your triggers and boundaries so
Yeah.
you don't get completely overloaded.
Right.
But isn't there a danger there of like becoming too isolated?
That's a good point, and he addresses that directly.
Okay.
The goal isn't to withdraw from the world, but to engage with it in a way that feels healthy.
So how do you strike that balance?
Well, it takes being mindful and intentional.
Okay.
First, identify your energy drainers and energy givers.
Okay.
Like what leaves you feeling depleted and what activities actually make you feel energized.
So once you know what those are,
Mhm.
you can
Right.
try to make choices that support you more. But what if some of those things that drain you, you can't really avoid, like work or family?
Well, then it's about finding ways to manage those situations better.
Okay.
Maybe setting boundaries with colleagues or scheduling regular breaks or practicing mindfulness to stay grounded.
So it all comes back to
It does.
knowing yourself and having those tools,
Yeah.
and then using those tools to navigate everything.
Exactly. And he reminds us that this self-knowledge can also be really helpful in figuring out our strengths and talents.
Okay.
Because sensitivity often comes with like heightened intuition, creativity, a deep capacity for empathy.
Yeah, those are all really good things.
They are.
So, like, what do you do with them? How do you make the most of them?
Well, he encourages us to explore those areas where our sensitivity really shines, you know?
Okay.
Maybe it's through some kind of creative expression like writing music or art.
Yeah.
Maybe it's through work that allows us to connect with others, like counseling or teaching.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just being that compassionate presence in the lives of our loved ones.
It's almost like he's saying, don't let sensitivity hold you back.
Exactly. Embrace it, nurture it,
Yeah.
and use it to create something beautiful and meaningful.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive, I'm realizing how empowering his message is.
It is.
It's like he's giving us permission to be ourselves.
Right.
Sensitivities and all.
And that's so liberating, especially in a world that pressures us to conform.
Exactly. And I think that's why his work is so impactful.
Yeah,
He's speaking to people who've often felt misunderstood.
he is. And offering a path not just to survive, but to thrive,
Yeah.
you know?
In a world that doesn't always get it.
Right. And he does it with such compassion and understanding.
Yeah. I want to circle back to that idea of reframing,
Okay.
because he really believes that just shifting your perspective can make a huge difference,
It can.
even in your subconscious.
Right.
So as you're listening to this, think about one area where you could start reframing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a relationship that's stressing you out,
Hmm.
a negative belief that's holding you back, or just something that bugs you every day.
Just try seeing it through a different lens.
Yeah, ask yourself, is there a more positive way to look at this?
You might be surprised at the impact it has.
This deep dive is just the beginning, you know?
Like this.
Explore Nakashima's work, see what else he has to offer.
There's so much there.
And remember, sensitivity's not a weakness.
No.
It's a superpower waiting to be unlocked.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep reframing.
And keep thriving.
Yeah.